Welcome in, everybody. Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Good evening. So excited to cook with you as always. Ready to bake with y'all today an Uruguayan chaha cake. And we're joined by our friends at Savor Recipes. Savor Recipes is really an awesome platform for you to go, whether you're thinking like, hey, what the heck do I cook for dinner tonight with what I have in my pantry? They can help you figure it out. Or maybe you want to explore new cuisine. Tonight you feel like cooking Thai cuisine, they can help orient you. And so today, they are kind enough to sponsor this lesson and help us dive into Uruguayan baking and pastry making. And this is one that I've been really, really excited about. You might have heard me talk about South American cuisine, just drop some of my favorite dishes. That's what I cook in my home a lot. My family's from Colombia. I've not been to Uruguay, but I've heard amazing things about the cuisine, and I've been trying little dishes here and there. And this is basically one of Uruguay's proudest exports. And so this Uruguayan chaha cake is a sponge cake. And what's special about it is that there are layers and layers and layers of delicious goodness with all this dairy from the dulce de leche, from the frosting, and then we cover it with a meringue. So I'm gonna go ahead and walk you through some of the basic process here. And also, we have our moderator here, Christina, in the chat. So if you've got any questions, please direct them there. And Christina will go ahead and answer them or direct them to me.
Hey, everybody. It's good to be here with all of you. And don't think for 1 second I didn't pick the cake class on a Tuesday night. So I'm happy to be here, but let me know what you need in the chat.
Smart. Pick the cake class. I love it. So we're going to start by making the batter. And the first things first, if you're a little bit of a masochist, you could do this all by hand, but you're going to be here for hours and hours and hours. I really, really recommend you either use an electric mixer, handheld, or you get one of these in terms of a high-powered mixer. So we're going to go ahead and make the batter first, and then we're going to get the cake in the oven. While that's going in the oven, we're going to get going on the filling. And at the same time, you would get the dulce de leche going in the Instant Pot. That's the earliest thing you would do. The first things first is get the dulce de leche going. And then we're going to get with some of the assembly pieces. And I'll show you, there's a little bit of a construction project. This is not a baking project that's for the faint of heart. So if you're not a big baker, this is definitely going to feel like a little bit of a project. But the nice thing about this time of year is that you might have some extra hands in the kitchen. Maybe you got some friends, family visiting. And so this is the perfect chance to take advantage of having those extra hands, go above and beyond, maybe impress some folks. This is pretty elaborate and beautiful, beautiful cake. So I'm excited to dive into this one with y'all. And we're gonna go ahead and dive in with the batter here. So in our electric mixer, we're gonna first put these 4 eggs. It's the entire egg, and not just the white, not just the yolk. And we're gonna get that in there. And then we are going to add our granulated sugar. And then we are gonna beat the heck out of these eggs and sugar. And basically, we're trying to get this to the point where it's just kind of starting to peak. What you want the eggs to look like, you really wanna get them to a thick consistency where they're not gonna peak like they would with egg whites, but they are going to start to kind of hold their form a little bit more. And so we're gonna beat this on high, and we're gonna do that for about probably about several minutes, if not longer. Yeah, we've got that going there. And one of the things that's really cool about this chaha cake, besides that it's got layers and layers of delicious cream and dulce de leche and it's sponge cake, and then the other thing that I didn't mention is that there are canned peaches. And so you get that sweetness that you're not really gonna get from fresh peaches, from the syrup that's in the peaches. And we're also gonna use that in some of our batter. And so we're gonna incorporate that just before we add this flour. And as this is kind of starting to peak, that's when we'll add the peach syrup. Let's see.
Okay, so we got a peach question. Somebody direct messaged me and asked, are peaches like traditional Uruguayan fruits, or is this part of like when canning became a thing? Like, what you got?
That's a really good question. I had to look that up too, because I think of peaches and I think of like the American South. But really, peaches actually came from China, and then they made their way to Europe, and then they made their way to the Americas in the 1500s. So we think of peaches as like a very US thing, but really they made their way to South America before they made their way here. And so they were starting to be cultivated around that time, maybe a little bit afterwards, 1600s. We've got a long history of peaches in Latin America. And you could use other fruit, you could use something like nectarines, but that's really not gonna be the traditional chaha. The traditional chaha is the peaches. Here we have them. This is about a can and a half. It's probably gonna be just over a can. And if you're like, well, what the heck do I do with the rest of that half can? I love eating it the next morning with my yogurt and granola. Maybe you can incorporate it into another dessert. So we're gonna continue blasting it on a high heat. And looks like we're starting to get thicker. We're definitely getting some consistency. But as that's going, I got some time to talk about the dulce de leche. So this is something that you can buy store-bought from Latin stores if you really don't feel like making it. The thing is, it's really, really easy to make, so why not make it at home? The easy way to do it is to leave it in the can, and you're gonna want to wash the label off the off of the can. So wash the label off and then remove all of that gum. And why do we do that? Well, you're gonna put it either in a deep pot of water boiling, or you're gonna put it in an Instant Pot. And if you don't clean off that gum, it's gonna turn into gunk that's gonna line the edge of your pot or your Instant Pot or your pressure cooker. And it's gonna make it a pain in the butt for the next thing you cook, and it's really not fun to scrub. And then you're gonna drop it in the water, and if you're pressure cooking it, you're going to do that for 35 minutes. So I usually set it, if I'm cooking it in an automated pressure cooker, I'll usually set it to 30 minutes of actual cook time, because it starts to pressure cook before those 30 minutes. So 30 minutes of cook time will get you to 35 of actual pressure cooking. And then it should be looking somewhat like this, almost like a coffee type color.
Chef, could you use a crock pot if you don't have an Instant Pot to make the dulce de leche?
Absolutely, you could use a crock pot, and if you're using just a regular pot, you could totally do that. It's just gonna take about several hours instead of about 20 to 30 minutes. And so it's just gonna extend the time. And then once you are all done, once you have released the pressure from your Instant Pot or you're done boiling for 3 hours, you're gonna remove that can very, very carefully with tongs and either just let it cool down on its own, or the easiest way is to dump it in a bath of ice water. And that's just really the easiest way to make sure that you don't get a dulce de leche explosion. Dulce de leche explosion sounds like a fun band name, but I don't want any of that in my kitchen. So we've been doing this for about a few minutes. It's looking like this is closer, to 5 minutes at the very least, with getting this to the point where it's kind of starting to peak a little bit. And I could see as I opened it up and I picked up that whisk that the egg was not really sticking to the whisk. That's a sign that it's not quite peaking. Once it's starting to really stick to that whisk as I lift it up, that's a good sign that we are there. And let's see if I've been patient enough. It's hard to be patient with a crowd like this, but I'm telling you, it is worth it. And we are just kind of getting there where it's starting to, you can see that it's starting to kind of peak just a little bit. And it's not gonna peak because it was the egg whites and the egg yolks, but you can see that it's holds its form just a little bit. And then this is that point where I'm going to incorporate the flour, and I'm going to do it, first before you incorporate the flour is the syrup. This is the point where you want to do the syrup, and we're gonna get this activated and moving as we kind of pour it in, and just little by little, just to kind of evenly get a little bit of that peach flavor into the cake itself. So we're just kind of really trying to meld the flavors, peach from many angles. Who doesn't love a good peach? Who doesn't love some syrup? So we're gonna continue mixing here, and then this is the point when we will add our flour. And so this is when we wanna move it to the lowest setting. We can overmix, and so we want to do this little by little, and so we want to just kind of slowly pour it in. And then I'm really not gonna use this actual mixer for very long. I'm gonna now continue with the spatula to make sure that I don't overmix this. So we're just about there. So we're gonna continue incorporating this flour into the batter, just kind of mixing as much as I can, folding, not mix heavy, but more folding. That's the proper word here. And we're just about there to dump it into our baking pan here, which I have sprayed already with this is ghee. You could use butter spray or a neutral baking spray as well. And we have a little bit of flour, and then we're just about there to pour it in and get it into the oven. So we're gonna get this into this pan. Those of you who have astute eyes are gonna maybe let me know in the chat that it does not look like an 8-inch pan. And the size of the pan matters. I will tell you why, because it's gonna affect your baking time. And so for us, we have about a 10-inch pan, and really you're gonna wanna use a smaller pan. So if you have like an 8-inch, that's gonna be better. And the reason is because a thicker sponge cake is gonna make it easier to layer and cut it. And so the thicker your sponge cake is, the easier it's gonna be to do that. We're gonna get the oven going to 400, and we're gonna drop this in for 12 minutes. And then we are going to lower the temperature. I think a sponge cake is the kind of thing that it has some nuances, like you saw with the mixing and getting those eggs and everything aerated and incorporated with the sugar. But I think that there's room to play around and experiment. You just got to make sure you don't overbake. In my test, I tested it after 15 minutes. So rather than cooking it that whole 25 through, I checked it after 15 minutes with a cake tester or with a little skewer stick, just to make sure that there was no sticky dough and that it all had the right color and everything. But you can always bake something a little bit more. You can't really unbake something once it's baked. So I would say that's kind of how to experiment with different baking dishes. And now we're going with the frosting. And so we've got the cream filling. And so we've got this is the heavy cream, 2 cups. And I'm gonna pour that in. I put that in the freezer before, just to kind of make sure that we keep it fully chilled, because it can heat up quite a bit as it's mixing if you're just doing this fully at room temperature. And then we have the sweetened condensed milk, the evaporated milk. There you are, that goes in there. And so we've got this here with this is for the frosting. So we've got some cream, and this is a really high fat content cream. So we've got at least 30% fat. And then we have this granulated sugar, which we put through a sifter just to make sure that we don't have any clumping. And so I just put a little sifter that was about just the exact same size as this as I poured it from the measuring cup into here. Same thing goes with the flour. You always want to pour your flour through a sifter as well. So before I put the flour in here for our cake batter, I also sifted it, same way I did with the sugar. This is that point, now that I see that the frosting is starting to thicken up a little bit, I'm gonna add that sugar just little by little. This is powdered sugar, baking sugar, very, very fine. And then we're gonna kind of keep it going. This is just to make sure that it incorporates evenly. We dump it all in. You might have one section that's really more of the sugar versus the other, and to really kind of help it get to the right consistency. And this is definitely thickening up. This is looking like it's just about there. And how do we know when it's ready? We're gonna lift this up. We're gonna use our whisk. Might as well use that rather than dirty something else. So we have, let's check it out. How are we doing here? The consistency is like, I can pick this up and it's really, it's peaking, right? This is a legit hard peak. when you take the whisk and you go like that and it doesn't collapse, the mountain stays as it is, right? That's really like a hard peak type situation where the frosting is going to behave the way we want it. The sponge cake is just at the point now where we should be able to lower the temperature. And so again, we lowered that from 400 to 350. And for most people, that would be another at least 20 minutes if you're cooking in an 8-inch. If you're cooking in a 10-inch, as we are, or something even bigger, you want to make sure that you lower that time to 15 minutes or less. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the temp. We're probably just about a minute out, but this is close enough for me. And so I am now lowering the temp to 350. I just want to show you what it looks like in terms of the finished product, what the cake looks like after, in my case, 15 minutes of baking at 350. This is what it looked like. And so you see, like, it's pretty dark brown, especially along the edges there. But if I were to kind of like, it's still like a little spongy. It's not totally like a dense thing. And especially here in the middle, we want to make sure that it's soft once it's cooled. So it's going to be a lot harder once it's cooled. You're going to need to let it cool for probably at least 15 minutes. And so I would take it out of the baking mold and then set it on like an elevated rack as you let it cool. If you try to work with it while it's hot, it's just going to fall apart and it's going to be really tricky to work with. So yeah, this is what it should look like though. And if you're cooking for a crowd, you want to make a big version of this, I would double up the batter recipe, and then you can take this thing and just cut the whole disc in half, which is a way to make a bigger version of this. But since I'm just showing you and I kind of want to do a quick version of this, we're going to kind of like layer this as basically like a quarter, right? And so we're going to have a very tall piece of cake, and I want to kind of show you what the insides look like as well. And so we're going to quarter this, and then we're going to basically just start assembling. So
While you're cutting the cake, Chef, I just want you to know that the run to the kitchen with forks after this class for this jumbo slice you're about to make us is going to be stampede worthy or level, I guess. So
I'm ready.
Be advised.
I'm ready for the crowds. I'm excited about this one. I've been thinking about this dish all week, wanting to eat it. I'm not kidding. All right. And so this is when we're going to start assembling. And so I'm going to kind of use one as my base layer. And the first thing that I'm going to do is get a layer of dulce de leche. And we're just going to kind of like evenly spread it. Evenly spread. Holy cow, that looks good. Evenly spread. And then once I've got that most of the way covered, then I'm going to go ahead and take my filling. And when I say filling, this is also what's going to be the frosting on the outside. So we're going to use that for both. We got plenty of it. We don't need to be super conservative, but we're just going to kind of lather it on, and we're going to cover all of that dulce de leche with the frosting. And then at this point, this is where we're going to add these amazing peaches. And this is where the adult construction project, I feel like it takes us back to our childhood days. This is like a time of year where a lot of people I know are like making gingerbread houses and things like that. This is my version of a gingerbread house. Even better, because I want to eat the whole thing immediately, not just stare at it. But it's definitely like a fun one with kids. There's a lot of construction and things going along with it. And then I'm going to get another layer here, and we're going to just rinse and repeat, basically. And then we're going to continue with the frosting. Boom. Last layer. And then this is where we're going to add some more of the peaches on top. And then, if you're wondering, where does the meringue come into play? This is where it comes into play, and this is where it gets its name. So chaha is actually the name of a bird, very kind of like, it looks almost like a mohawk type bird. It's got like a lot of plumage on its head. And so the plumage looks a little bit like the broken meringue, which we're gonna put on this cake. So for this one, we're using you could use store-bought meringue. I don't think it's totally cheating if you go and get some store-bought meringue, but the meringue, when you break it into these little kind of crumbles, that's what's gonna make it look like this bird that I was talking about, the chaha bird. So I'm just kind of crumbling it into little pieces and sprinkling it on top. And that's what gives it that look of like the feathers of the bird. And we're just gonna continue spreading that around the edge of the cake.
Well, and relatively speaking, this cake is actually pretty light compared to some of what goes down next month. And that's actually what I love about it, is that like when you've eaten such a heavy meal, like something with fruit and meringue and like it feels lighter, whether it is or not, but yes.
I agree. It feels light in a lot of ways, and it looks light. So yeah, I think we're ready to eat. What do you say, folks? All right, gonna go ahead and dive in. Wow. We got a little collapsing situation, but I'm not mad about it. It's all gonna go to my mouth. That's where it's ending up. And so if you compress the pie a little bit before you start to add the icing and that kind of thing, that'll also help a little bit. Moment of truth.
Dun, dun, dun. Another Great British Bake Off thing is that there's so many ways to bake. There's the very organized bakers, there's the like devil may care bakers, there's the like it makes sense to no one but me bakers, but I do love that whatever kind of baker you are, you can still turn out something really delicious. Mm-hmm. How's that going down?
And I would say this is pretty freaking delicious. I'm very, very happy with how this came out. All of the combination of textures, you really kind of get like a different piece of it with each chew. I get like a different flavor note of the peaches and of the dulce de leche. It's just a really rich, but I don't feel like I'm gonna be, oh gosh, I can't go anywhere, I can't move after this, which is nice. So I'm gonna be sharing this one with the family. I really hope everybody else has a fun time cooking with this one, baking at home, if you're bold enough to try it. And I wanna let you know that our next class, we're gonna have tomorrow a Thanksgiving hotline. So this is part of our Simple and Savory Cooking Club. And so starting tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, we're gonna have a hotline so you can call in with any cooking issues. We can talk through it. And then on Monday, after the holidays, for something a little bit lighter, switch up from all those leftovers, we're gonna have a balsamic roasted grape salad. And so yeah, can't wait to see you. Thanks everybody, really appreciate it, and have a great night.
Thanks everyone.